Hello. Today we're going to talk about a feature that many people who have transitioned from software packages like Jira often complain is missing in Microsoft Planner, and that is the option of auto numbering. So if you've ever used software like Jira, you would see something like this. So for example, EE7, CT4, AD109, the idea being that you can choose a project code, and every time you create a new task, it automatically gets numbered. And then you can view these tasks together. And just by looking at it, it becomes easy for you to know which particular project it belongs to. Now, while Microsoft Planner does give you the option of seeing all of the tasks assigned to you in one place, it doesn't really give you the ability to automatically number these tasks. So we're going to talk about one method in which you can do this auto numbering for free using the tools that are inbuilt in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. So let's get started. Here you can see that I have multiple teams, and there's a team called IT within which I've created a channel called Microsoft 365. I've created a plan that is within this team. If you do not know how to do this, it's pretty simple. You can basically go and click on tasks by planner and to do, and you can create a new plan. Because I've already created a plan, I'm not going to do so. But the general idea is that as soon as you create a plan, you will see a post in the channel which says that a plan has been created. Now, when you create a plan like this, it not only shows up in your team as a tab, but also on Microsoft Planner, because that's actually the real application where you're going to see all of your tasks. So you can go to tasks.office.com and you'll be able to see all the tasks assigned to you, as well as under Planner Hub, you can see all of the tasks. So here you can see the Microsoft 365 plan. And there's a bucket, you can add other buckets as you see fit. But for the purposes of this tutorial, we're just going to talk about how to have a task auto numbered. Now, in order to do this, we will use a tool called Power Automate. So if you go to your office.com, you can see here, there's a list of tools. One of them is called Power Automate. You can click on that. The first time you click on it, it's going to ask you where you're based. You can enter those details, and after that, we can just jump right into it. So let's now go into my flows. Okay, so I'm going to start by telling you the quick shortcut method where you can just import a package that I've prepared for you. You have to make a couple of changes, and then you should be good to go. So first of all, you should download the zip file that is available on my GitHub. I'll provide the link for that in the video. And once you have that ready, you just need to import that package. And we'll go through that right now. Okay. Now we're gonna update this. I'm gonna select create as new. If you want to change the name here, you could do that. Next step is to use the planner connection. Right now it has my email, but when you import it into your environment, it's going to have your email address. So you're just going to go and select that, hit save, and then hit import. And when this gets imported, you'll basically be ready to go. So flow has been successfully created. Run it to make sure it's working. So let's open the flow. All right. So you can see that it ends up coming under my flows. And now here, we're going to go and select group ID. The group ID is basically an alphanumeric code. When you open this in your environment, it's going to give you something that looks like gibberish. In my environment, it gets translated into my group IT, and the plan ID will also show up as an alphanumeric string for you, and that's getting translated into M365 plan in my environment. So you're going to go ahead and select both of these as you see fit in your environment. To list tasks, it's the same thing again. And then you have to only go ahead and make a change here. Under concat, you just need to put whatever you want your plan tickets to have prepended to them. So for example, if you want to have TM or whatever, I don't know, tomato mozzarella, or whatever you want your plan tickets to start with, you can basically just write that code here. And once you do that, you're good to go. So let's go ahead and test it. Right now, I'm not changing that. I'm keeping it as empty. And now it says it's ready. Let's test it. But here's a problem. It's disabled. So we need to enable it first. So in order to do that, there are a couple of ways. One thing to do that is to go here and under flow checker, you can turn it on. And the other way is to go to my flows. You can see here it's grayed out. You can go here and you can click turn on. Both of these methods work. And now you can see that it's no longer grayed out. I can then go ahead and edit, and to test, I will just go and manually trigger the flow, and it says create a task to trigger it. So now it says to see it work, now create a task. So let's do that. We'll go ahead, and this is the second task on the board. So I'll call it, say, second task. All right, flow ran successfully. Let's see, we can go and refresh it, and you can see that it says MT2. So it's been labeled as we expected it to. Now, for those of you that are interested in learning more about how I designed this flow and how you could do something similar, you have the next few minutes of the video that will go through that. But if you are not interested in doing that and you just want to use this flow that I have exported, you can go ahead and do that. For you, I would say you can just skip to the timestamp that's provided here in the video, and you can just look at the limitations of this particular approach. So we're going to create a new flow, an automated cloud flow. From blank, you can give it a name. Let's just call it, say, auto numbering M365 plan. Right. Now, you want this to happen when a new task is created. So we're going to say when a task, and you get a few options. We want it when a new task is created. And here's our plan. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we have to choose a group ID. Remember that every team in Microsoft is actually represented as an M365 group. So I have a team here called IT, or a group called IT, and the plan ID is M365. It only lists one because I only have one plan here. Okay, so that's our trigger. This flow is going to get triggered when a new task is created in the IT team under the Microsoft 365 plan. Now, the idea here is that we want to be able to number the task based on how many tasks are there on the board. Let's say that the board had 4 tasks. You've now added a new task. You would like it to be numbered task 5. So essentially, the thing that we want is to list the number of tasks on the board, but there's no option to do that in Microsoft Power Automate. So what we're going to do is use the list tasks feature. So let's just say list tasks. You can see under planner, there are triggers, and then there are actions. So we're going to choose the list tasks option. If you want, you can also see a summary. You can click here and get more details of this. So let's go ahead and select list tasks. Again, we have the same group ID, same plan ID. Okay. All right. So now that we've listed the task, what do we want to do now? You've created a task. Now this task has a specific task title. We want to just change the title. We want to update this task. So let's say update task. There is an option to do that. You can use the version 2 option. You can also use the version 1 option for this purpose. Let's just use the version 2 option. Okay. We can also see the difference between them. So you can see that there are multiple colors here. These are just labels, and they tell you whether a task has a specific label or not. So we can go back and look at the task, and you can see here that when you add a label, you have all these colors. So if I choose purple, that means purple is true in the list that we have seen here. Okay, let's go ahead and just for the purposes of learning, let's try and do update task and look at version 1. And you see here that it doesn't give you the option of enabling or disabling specific labels. So I think it's better to go with the latest version, but as you can see, that title is present in both of them. It wouldn't really matter for the purposes of our application if we chose one versus the other. But in general, I like using the latest possible options in case you want to expand this flow later on. It makes things easier. Okay, now the first thing it asks for is a unique identifier of the task to update. Now you might ask the question, there's only one task that was created. Why is it asking me the unique identifier of the task to update? Isn't there just one task? That might be true, but the thing is, just before that, the step you took was to list the tasks. By doing so, now you have access to all the tasks on the board. So if there were 100 tasks on the board, you have now listed 100 of those tasks, and you have the ability of selecting the task ID for any one of them. And I'll show you how. So let's go here and enter custom value. And now I can, you can see that there are some outputs from list tasks. And then there are some outputs from when a new task is created. Both of these steps were taken earlier. And let's just look for ID. So when I look for ID, you can see that there is a value ID of the task from the list tasks action. And then there is an ID of the task from when a new task is created. Now, if I select this option, everything is hunky-dory because there's only one task to be selected. But on the other hand, if I go and select the value ID that comes from list tasks, you can see that this apply to each option comes up here, because this means that we are going to apply whatever action that we want to take, which is update our task, to every particular ID that was generated as a result of the list tasks action. Now, this is not something we want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this, and we will go back to what we were doing before. So update task, version 2, I'm going to go back and select ID, and I will select the ID, which represents the new task that was created. Now, what we want to do is basically change the title of the task. In order to do this, we basically need to have the original task title that was there, and we want to prepend it with a specific number and a character. So let's say that if for Microsoft 365, I use M for Microsoft, T for 3, and I want to code my tasks MT. So the second task would be MT2. The first task is MT1. And now, because we already have a task on the plan, I'm basically going to generate a new task, and that one's going to be labeled MT2, blah, 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 whatever the title is. Okay, so first of all, I want the task title to be there. If I search the word title, I can see that there is title of the task from when a new task is created, but I want it to be concatenated with the code that I want. So I have here the concatenate command under expression. I'll use this function, and let's say that I want it to be called MT, and I want to give it a number, but let's say I don't know right now how to get that number. Okay, so to begin with, because we're doing this step by step, we're just going to have MT, and then we're going to follow it up with the original task, because obviously we don't want that. If you name the task blah, 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 I don't want this flow to run and your blah, blah, blah title just gets overwritten by MT. So we're going to concatenate this with the title of the task, and let's go here and look for title. So title of the task, we will click it, and okay, just want to check, maybe I double clicked it. Oops. All right, so let's delete this, and yeah, so you can see that I clicked on title, but basically the results here are trigger outputs, question mark, and then that's the output that you're getting. Okay, so I'll click OK here, and now what I expect is anytime a new task is created, it will just add the words MT dash in front of it. Okay, so let's save this, and now your flow is ready to go. Let's test it. Now, when I test it, I can do it manually, which means that it could be done instantaneously here. So I'll click the test option, and now I will go back to my plan. Now note here that it says to see it work now, create a task. So as long as I don't create a task and the flow doesn't start running, you're going to see this thing rotating over here. So let's go ahead and create a new task. You see here, now the flow is running, and very soon it's going to say it's done. So it says your flow ran successfully. Let's go and check. So you do see that it says MT dash new task, but this still doesn't solve our purpose because we wanted it to be numbered, and it's not. the reason I did this is because I wanted to show you the process of how I came up with this. So let's look at this flow that has run once so that we can get an idea of how we can extract the number of tasks on the board. Now, if I go into the list tasks option, let's go here. So these are inputs, these are outputs. I want to see the raw outputs here. And you can see here that the results include body. And then within body, I have odata.context at odata.count, which is 2. This is the number of tasks on the board. Okay, so let's just copy it. And now what I want to see is how am I supposed to use this in my code? So in order to do that, let's go ahead and check here. One of the things we can check is that when we did empty new task, remember that when we were looking at the value new task, we were basically just looking at the task / title, and that was a trigger output. So I can take you back into the edit option, and we can see here that when we were writing this function, we selected title and it gave us this trigger outputs $body / title. And this was the result of the very first trigger, which is when a new task is created. So let's go ahead and look at how that was represented. So if I go back into this particular run and I look at the outputs, I would have to download it. Let's see. It's not very readable here, but there are other options that you can use just to look at it better. But for the purposes of this, let's look at this, right? It says title right over here, and you can see body, and then you can see this curly brace starting, which ends somewhere down here. But within this, you can see that it says odata.etag, plan ID, bucket ID, and title. So when that was listed, it was listed as body / title. Okay, so this gives me an idea of how I should write odata.count. So we're going to go and try that particular thing. So let's go back into our task. We are now in the concatenate function. Okay, now what I want to do is concatenate this with the output that's generated by step number 2. In step number 2, when we have a list of tasks, we want to get the output body, and within that, we want to get odata.count. So let's look at that. Now, if I go to dynamic content, I have options. Under list tasks, I have body. That's perfect. As soon as I click it, it says output of the list tasks action, and it says body. But now let's go ahead and look at this. Here, it says body / title for the task title. So what I'm going to do is do something identical. Do a / here, copy it, and I'm going to say that this is good. I'm going to also add a space here. And at this point, we're pretty much set. Okay, good. We're going to update this, save this, and try it again. So let's go into this and call it test again. We wait. So the flow ran successfully. Let's check the results. And now, lo and behold, it says MT3 test again. So now you've been able to number a task right after you've created it, and you have the same functionality that you can get in softwares like Jira. Now, while this is all great, there are a few limitations. The first limitation is that if you implement this Power Automate flow in the middle of a plan, which means you've already created a bunch of tasks and now you've implemented this flow, obviously it's not going to go ahead and number your previous tasks. So you would have to have this right from the beginning of your plan. If you are doing this in the middle of a plan, then I would recommend that you manually number your tasks similarly, and then this particular thing would go ahead as expected. Now, here's the thing that's interesting. You can see that there's an MP2 that came up here. That has happened because I had another flow that was running in parallel when I was preparing for this particular video. So let's go back to that and look at this flow. And in this particular flow, you can see that when I'm updating a task, I'm using MP, right? This is a happy accident because it tells you that you should never allow multiple flows on the same task or you're going to run into problems like this. So you should have only your IT admin doing these tasks, because if you create a flow for that particular plan and someone else creates a flow, then there could potentially be issues. So in order to stop this from happening, let's just delete this particular flow because I don't need it anymore. And I'm also going to manually edit these out. And let's continue our discussion. Okay, so the other limitation is that when I was testing this, you could see that I created a task and instantaneously the flow ran and you were able to get an update. In practice, that is not how things are going to happen. The reason for that is that Power Automate does not run flow instantaneously. It could sometimes take up to 5 minutes, depending on the plan that you have. For details on this, you can see that there are certain limits and for automated, scheduled, and instant flows. And within this, it will tell you how many seconds it's going to take. I think it depends on your plan. I believe that the best you can do is 60 seconds. It says minimum recurrence interval is 60 seconds. So that is something that you cannot overcome with this approach. And what that practically means is that sometimes when you create multiple tasks, one after the other, this approach is going to number them all the same. The reason for that is, let's say I have 3 tasks in the flow right now, and I quickly create 2 tasks. When the flow runs, let's say after a minute or 2 minutes, it's going to just count the total number of tasks on the board. And the total number of tasks on the board are 5. And then it's going to say, OK, for every new task that's created, let me just number it number 5. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. So let's say test 1 and test 2. OK, now it's going to take some time, and we will see that both of these tasks are going to get numbered MT5. So you can see that these tasks are numbered MT5, and also I ran this at 6:50. I created these tasks at about 6:50 local time, and the flow for this ran somewhere around 6:52. That's when I saw the tasks numbered. Say 6:51 technically. So two flows, one for each task at 6:51. So that's one limitation. And then the other thing that you can see is that if I were to copy a task over, let's say that you created a task, which is something like, let's say you're doing 2 projects and you say, create a brief overview for project 1. And it's a very similar project, and everything that you wrote in the ticket description for this particular task is similar to another project that you need to work on. So you could then say, I want to copy the task. And because they're very identical, you could say, well, let me just name it MT6. And in that case, let's say you say, OK, the assignment is similar, maybe dates are similar as well, and you copied that task over. Now, what's going to happen is that the next time this flow runs, it doesn't know that you've already numbered your task as MT6. So it's going to go ahead and add a number on top of it. So you're going to have 2 of these in front of your task, and that's going to look odd. Let's see when that happens. So you can see that it took about 4 minutes because this task was created at 6:54 p.m. local time. And if I go ahead and look at the runs, 6:57 is when it executed. So it's about 3 minutes, but on my clock, I could see this come up on the plan at 6:58. So as I was saying earlier, it could take up to 5 minutes. And you can see here that it decided to name the task MT6, even though I had already named it MT6, right? So you can see that there are a few limitations to this whole process. And of course, no matter how smart your process is, you're always going to have this issue where if there's some people in the team who want to have some fun, they could go ahead and change this numbering. And you always have the freedom of changing the task title. So anyone could go ahead and change the numbering or change everything as and when they want. But in general, if your team is disciplined, this automated approach would work. Now, I'm working on a course that will be launched early next year, and I will have free options which will give you the ability to overcome these challenges. So you don't have to wait for 5 minutes. You'll be able to instantly have your task numbered. You wouldn't have the problem of copying tasks over and getting renaming like we saw here. And of course, all of these approaches would be designed such that you can launch them across multiple plans, and you don't have to worry about having things numbering from the middle and so on, right? Because these will basically be available for you as soon as you launch the plan. That's it. Stay tuned for this course that we're working on. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to add them to the YouTube comment section. I will look at them. And then if you need other tutorials on this particular tool, then I can go ahead and do that. Well, if this video has been useful for you, please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel for similar other videos.